Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to attend my talk about using GitLab to power front-end technical interviews. So my name is Clement Ho. I'm a front-end engineering manager here at GitLab. I oversee the monitor team. I live in Austin, Texas, and my Twitter handle and GitLab handle is ClementMakesApps. So if you ever have any questions about this presentation or anything in general, I'd be happy to communicate through there. So let's take a step back and kind of talk about how GitLab has evolved over the last few years. So with GitLab, we've actually doubled the team size in the last few years. And this is a snapshot into our hiring graphs. It was quite a wild year between 2018, 2019, and 2019 to 2020. Imagine you were in our shoes, you had to double your team size, and all your interviews are remote. So as you can imagine, there's multiple challenges with this kind of rapid scaling in a remote environment. And some of the key problems we face were not enough interviewers, inconsistent and biased interview process, and at times it was very difficult to measure how we're raising the bar. So by raising the bar, I mean, how do we make sure that each hire that we hire makes the team better? So we decided to use GitLab to solve these problems, and you should too. So what were we doing before? So previously, we used a combination of different techniques, sometimes dependent on the interviewer, sometimes depending on which time frame we were interviewing. So we did sometimes a mix of these or one of these. So let me go over some of the techniques we used. So sometimes we used the verbal technical questions. So what this looks like is sometimes we would engage in technical conversation with the candidate, asking them to deep dive and explain certain topics, and then evaluate from there. Other times, we would also ask candidates to do data structures live coding exercise to see how they would perform. And then other times, we would give them a prompt and say, hey, like, can you build this based on this requirements in this image? And we kind of get to watch how they would progress through that. And then once in a while, we would also send candidates a take-home project with a prompt that they can spend a couple hours at home and then implement it and then send it back for us to review. So these techniques had their own advantages. So with verbal technical questions, we had ability to measure how they communicate. This is really important in an all-remote environment where you need to be able to communicate technical concepts with your peers, with your managers. So this allowed us to really understand that better. For data structures, this allowed us to have more consistent measurement and evaluation. Data structures are pretty consistent nowadays, so it allowed managers and interviewers to kind of have a similar language of comparing candidates in a more consistent manner. For the prompt strategy technique, this allowed us to measure the candidate's ability to build something. So it's very similar to how we have at GitLab, where a designer may have some designs and asking a candidate to build it in front of the manager or interviewer allows us to better understand how they can build. And then with the take-home project, we can actually mimic a little bit of what it works like to be remote, because a candidate can work on it at their own time, whatever works with them, whatever scheduling. And so that was a really neat part of that technique. Unfortunately, these techniques also had a lot of drawbacks. So with verbal technical questions, it does not always equate to a person being able to code. So it's good to have a strong communication skills of talking about technical concepts. But if a candidate is not able to code, that's going to hurt the team in the short and long run. With the data structures technique, it's also not a really strong indicator of ability. It's not an everyday scenario where an engineer needs to be able to write a binary search tree, for example. And so it's not a really good measurement of our day-to-day output. In addition, it also makes it very challenging for maybe more senior people that haven't been dealing with data structures on their day-to-day. They might be more rusty compared to a recent college graduate. So this creates a lot of disparity in that instance as well. For the prompt, this can be really difficult to measure and compare because there's usually many ways that you can go and approach building a user interface. And so that creates a lot of bias in the process. And then for the take-home project, this technique is not great because it disadvantages people from underrepresented groups. So not everyone has the ability to work a full-time job and have undivided a couple hours of time to work on a project. For example, imagine a single parent with kids may not be able to have the privilege or opportunity to really focus and really do well on a take-home project compared to someone that has the resources to maybe have someone take care of their kids during that time so they can have undevoted time. And at GitLab, we're really big on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so we definitely want to reduce the chances of disadvantaging people from these groups. So what have we changed? Let's take a look. So what we decided to do is to standardize. We decided to have candidates go through a review of a merge request and a test project, and then fix the merge requests as part of the technical interview. So we decided to build a GitLab project called Project Seeder that would automate a lot of these parts of the process. So we have a template project that we would export, import, and basically give each candidate their own test project that they had to do for their interview. And this is all powered by GitLab using a bot user. Once we generate the test project, we would send candidates an email detailing the merge request and kind of some guidelines that we have. And we encourage the engineers to run it locally and use the resources they have on the internet. So here's a screenshot of kind of more trivial example where a candidate might receive a merge request and a link that they click on and look at it. Here we have a failing pipeline, which indicates maybe something that the candidate should look into, and so forth. So other ways for the interviewer side, we also standardized a grading rubric. So in order to reduce bias, we found that standardizing is really important. So here is a snapshot of kind of the template we use using Google Sheets. And unfortunately, we have decided that the categories for the evaluation is not public, so they are redacted here. But here hopefully gives you a screenshot, a window into how we operate. We have some scoring requirements to help better evaluate whether a candidate should pass a technical interview, as well as which level we think that they should align with. In addition to that, we also take the metrics that we've evaluated from these rubrics and populate in a dashboard. And this gives you a snapshot for the interviewers and managers to understand how candidates are performing and allows to tweak parts of the process. So the process today by no means is perfect. There's definitely ways to improve, but by having a dashboard, we're able to take a look at it and determine how to iterate on it and create a best positive interviewer experience, as well as give us the best candidates that we're looking for. So let's run through a quick demo. So here I have created an example GitLab group called GL commit example. And here I have the project seeder that I forked from the official open sourced one that we've developed, a template project that kind of creates the MR template, and then a group for interview projects. So in our example, I've already created a few projects here, but in GitLab internally, we have a group where each candidate has their own project here. So let's go through the template real quick so I can show you what it looks like. So here we have merge requests and we have an interview test MR. And very similar to the screenshot we saw earlier, we have a failing pipeline. And this is kind of the template that we're going to use for candidates. So we look at changes here. It looks like we changed hello world to hello GitLab commit. And let's imagine we're the candidate. We would investigate the failing pipeline and notice that its failing test is because the test expects hello world and we're expecting hello GitLab commit. So in the real world example, the interview merge request would definitely be a little bit more complex, but this is just to give you a feel of how that looks like. So let's run through generating a project for a candidate. So here I have a link that is pre-filled. So one of the cool things about GitLab is being able to run a manual pipeline and pre-filling some of the variables. So if you click on this, I actually have it preloaded. It actually loads pre-filled variables. So with the Project Seeder app, we're able to leverage CI variables for this really cool instance. We have predefined variables already set for the tokens, access token for the bot user that generates and processes all this. So interviewer, when they're processing a project for a candidate, all they have to do is add the username of the candidate, the expiration for when they should remove the user from the project, as well as the name of the project. So here I'm going to go ahead and run the pipeline. And so we actually have to hit play. We run through the pipeline, and this will basically export the template project, import it, and add the user and go through all that. So we'll just let it run. Awesome. So now we are done with this job, CI job. It's gone through all the process. Let's go ahead and take a look at the new interview project that's been created. So let me expand this group. We notice example project was the name of the project that we decided to create. And if we go to merge requests, we see the interview test MR. It's running through the pipeline, and this should fail because it's a duplicate of what we had before. Awesome. So here is the full example of what it looks like. So let's go back to the slides. So let's talk about a little bit why this model was better. So this model is better because we're able to measure more realistic scenarios and have a consistent measurement. So let's dive a little deeper. Realistic scenarios. So what's really cool about this setup is that we're able to build our interview project that matches our product architecture. So in this trivial example, it's using GitLab Pages, but for us internally, our test project is mimicking Ruby on Rails with Vue. And so we make sure to have that so that candidates can understand how they would perform on our actual product. We're also able to measure how candidates problem solve holistically across multiple areas. We're able to see how did they react to testing? Are they proficient with Git? Because you'd ideally want them to run this locally. And we can also understand how candidates problem solve because we also allow candidates to use the internet whenever they're stuck during the actual interview, showing how they can figure out what to do next. So why should you use GitLab in your technical interview? For us, this allows us to implicitly evaluate candidates. Like previously mentioned, we can see how people use Git. Before, we didn't have any way to measure that, and some candidates, believe it or not, did not know how to use Git. It also allows us to test kind of the understanding of CI that a candidate have, and also maybe understand whether they know Git flow. We're also able to measure performance using the same tooling that we use at our company, and maybe for you, whether your company is adopting GitLab or has adopted GitLab, there's a lot of value in being able to expose candidates to the same tooling you use at your company so you can have a better understanding of how they would work when they join your company. And then the other aspect is being able to measure testing proficiency. And testing is a really important part of software development, and being able to understand that a candidate knows how to observe a failing pipeline and know what to do when the tests fail and what to write to get them passing is very valuable. So last but not least, I want to share some resources. The Project Seeder is publicly available, so feel free to take a look at that and contribute or inspect how we leverage GitLab. And although we don't publish our evaluation criteria for the interview metrics, the dashboard is publicly available, so you're welcome to check that out. And last but not least, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter. @ClemMakesApps is my handle. Thank you very much.